Quickly moving towards our first panel discussion for today, driving India's road transport electrification, its challenges, opportunities, and the road ahead. May I please welcome our respected panelists for the discussion. Mr. Nitin, CEO, New Mobility Reliance. Mr. Joseph Teja, Consultant, Senior Specialist, Electric Mobility Callstart. Mr. Abhishek Bansal, Lead Capital Goods and Investment Specialist, Automotive EVs, Invest India, Ministry of Commerce. Mr. Avdesh Jha, Executive Director, Glida. Mr. Sunil Bhambani, Managing Director, Adore Digatron Private Limited. And the session will be moderated by Ms. Komal, Kareer, Analyst, BloombergNEF. I request all the respected dignitaries to please take your seats as we move ahead towards our panel discussion session. Over to you, Ms. Komal.
Good to see you.
Hello, good morning everyone. I hope I am audible. Thank you for joining us today. It was a very insightful session. Nitin ji, the opening fire starter, kicking off this event. Now I'd like to shift gears a little bit and focus on electrification of mobility in India. We know that the government has big ambitions to move from a dominant gas-guzzling fleet to an electrified fleet. It's offering lots of policy supports, there's lots of ambitious targets. A few years back, if we were to talk about EV uptake in India, it was mostly a question of what if, but now it's clear we're rapidly moving towards EV adoption. Last year, for the first time, cumulative electric vehicle sales in the country surpassed 1 million number. We're also seeing rapid adoption across various vehicle segments, be it two-wheelers, three-wheelers, even four-wheelers for that matter. So our discussion today is mostly, I want to focus on the journey to electrification from merely a few hundred vehicles on the road to crossing a million mark. How did we reach there? What sort of learnings have we gleaned from our experience? And then going forward, what sort of opportunities, what sort of challenges are we going to face and how can we combat them? Mr. Nitin, sir, if I may, I'd like to start off with you. In the recent past, we've heard many announcements from Reliance, be it on the battery manufacturing space or the charging and swapping infrastructure space. Could you please speak more to how Reliance is approaching electric mobility in India, and how did you circle in on these two parts of the value chain to get started in India?
I think two things you rightly mentioned about what is the main thing which is, let me say, the ingredients for EV adoption in India. One is the reset cost of the battery, which is 40% of the price of the vehicle. How do you get cells made in India rather than importing those cells? Today, you know, all the OEMs who are making EV vehicles are importing cells from outside. So one is initiative by Reliance is to say, can we make cells in India, which is our gigafactory coming in Jamnagar. And if 40% of the price of the vehicle is battery, and therefore cells is the major component of the battery, made in India cells will always help us to reduce the price. Today you have subsidy, therefore people are buying with 4-5% penetration the EV vehicles, but if 40% comes down by, let's say, 25-30% because it's localization, it will bring the cost of the ownership of the vehicle down. And therefore the difference between the price of the petrol vehicle to an EV vehicle, that 40% extra will actually comes down, then people will start adopting. That is one. Second thing about charging, because anybody who is buying a battery has to know, where do I charge? Do I take it at home or do I have a public charging? We feel, and what is in our stall, which is in the hall, is to show how can you reduce the price of charging by including feeding of solar energy into the grid. Today the cost of electricity, let's say, is 10 rupees a kilowatt. If you're doing it from the home or from anywhere else, if you are able to reduce the price of the charging because you are putting solar into the grid, which Reliance will make solar panels, and the whole solar ecosystem will put in the country, If you do both, charging is like a petrol in a vehicle. Battery is something you're charging, and the amount of money you charge per kilowatt, if you reduce, again it reduces the cost of ownership. So Reliance will not be an automobile company, but will ensure in the ecosystem, whether it is making of batteries or charging, can we help reduce the prices, and by localizing, therefore solar panel localizing, cells localizing, this is what Reliance is trying to do.
So cost convenience through localization. You mentioned charging being a driver of customer demand earlier in your conversation. My next question, Mr. Jha, to you.
Yeah.
So GLIDA has been present in the Indian EV charging market since a long time now. It's emerged as one of the leading private players. So based on your experiences, could you speak to the successes and failures of rolling out EV charging infrastructure in India, and what sort of lessons have we learned from your experience?
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Komal. So we are operating close to around 520 plus public charging points, primarily for the car segment. And based on that, because we have been doing it for last 6 years in India, and prior to that, we were doing for almost 12 years in Norway, Finland, and Sweden. So based on that, we can say you that there are 3 elements for setting up the charging infrastructure in any place. So one is the charger itself, the second one is the location, and third one is electricity connections, which is availability. Now, as far as charger is concerned, the equipment is concerned, that's a sorted out, because in India we have good products, lot of manufacturers who gives you a good quality product, which is reliable, which is futuristic as well. But the challenge remains with the location and the electricity connections. Location primarily because it's 70%, 80% of the public place is owned by the government. And unless government comes up with a very favorable mechanism of giving these locations to the private sector, it will always have a challenge. Currently, what government is trying to do is that they are trying to extract maximum out of these locations. This is antithesis to the promoting this EV sector in the nascent stage, because if you see their bidding criteria, they are asking you that how much maximum you can give to government as a revenue share. Now, this is something unheard of in other part of the world in the initial days of the EV adoptions. You can take the example of London, you can take the example of Norway, where the government was giving the subsidies for the locations, they were giving the subsidies for the plug-and-play electricity connections, but they were leaving for the market to determine what is the price you will be charging, and government was not asking any revenue from there. Unfortunately, in India, the government is in the business of making money out of these locations. Instead of giving these locations at a favorable terms for a long term, out of a transparent process of bidding. So that is something which is a constraint. Now, second constraint is the electricity itself, because our electricity infrastructure has not evolved so much from the, even we are not having the 24/7 reliable electricity supply, even the domestic consumers across the country. So now here you require a high power capacity load connections. And if government doesn't have, then what they do? They ask you to set up the transformers for you, the entire electricity infrastructure for you. That adds almost as, equal to the cost of the charger, if it is not more. So this adds to the additional cost, which ultimately a charge point operator has to recover from the consumer. That will increase the end user's price, which will be detrimental for adopting the electric vehicles. So I think this is something where the government's intervention is needed in it transparently. Even the government of India has given that 1 rupee should be the, per unit of electricity should be the criteria. But if you see the government's tenders, normally state government's tenders, they keep asking that how much extra money you can give to the government. And at the end, they say that fine, we have given this criteria, ultimately you people are the bidder. And you are offering 10 rupees, 12 rupees, then what should I do? But the question is that you are asking the people to bid for it. And there would be players who might not be understanding the business in the long term. They come up and they give you this price, but then this is not sustainable. So I think these are the challenges which currently we are facing in India.
interesting. So while you're offering subsidized land, the cost of upgradation of power infrastructure sort of eats into the savings.
I'm not saying subsidized land. I'm saying that whatever is the fair price, you fix it. But give it, don't try to get the, the bidders to determine that what is the maximum revenue they will give you. Because at the end, one end, you are asking the bidders that your price would be capped. The government says that the price would be capped. At the one end, you are capping the price. At the second end, you are saying that how much money you can give to the government. This is not the time. Remember, see, I come from the hydro background. Remember the age 2003 to 2008, what happened? All the state governments went into bidding the hydro based on who can give the maximum upfront premium. Bidders went berserk. They gave crores and crores per megawatt. Ultimately, what happened? None of the hydro projects in the private sector, barring few, came into, in the commissioning stage. So it's an initial stage where the government needs to handhold the sector instead of fleecing it by committing them to give me this 10 rupees, 12 rupees, 5 rupees over a period of time.
So for a few more years, policy support is needed.
Absolutely.
Before we open it up to
Absolutely.
competition. Mr. Ambani, I will pose the same question to you. You've been in the charging business for some years now. What kind of challenges and threats have you faced in your journey while serving the Indian EV market? Do you echo the sentiment Mr. Jha expressed, and would you add anything to that?
I think I'm the fan of Mr. Jha since long because he has a tremendous knowledge in all this charging, whether it's chargers or the infrastructure. Okay, now we have been in this business since last actually 50 years. It's not related to EV charging, but the charging and the power electronics, even the batteries, testing equipments for the batteries, formation circuits, formation rectifiers for the batteries, and today it is lithium-ion batteries. Threats and opportunities, when we talk about opportunities come from the threat, right? And today what we see is the competitive market. If you really look at it, India is hugely competitive. And believe me, this will go on and on. The prices will come down and down every day, but at the same time, the demand for new features will go on increasing. This is not only in India, this is globally. I remember 2005 to 2010, same thing happened with telecom market. The attributes that will differentiate the leaders from the rest of the pack, I believe, will be the investment in the R&D, investment in the technology, investment in the software. That will differentiate us from the rest of the pack. Today, if you really look at it, it's all L1 game. If you want a volume buying, it's all L1 game. I'll talk about that later. But I feel the opportunities are huge. I mean, the one who can give to the consumers what they want at the competitive prices, and that can happen only provided you are able to invest in your R&D, you have your own indigenized product in place, you have your own software team, then only it's possible to give those competitive prices to the consumers with better features. You know, we have been on the opportunities. I think everybody looks at around, if you really look at it today, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, fleets, I mean, they are growing today. Four-wheelers, yes, we can see in last 1 year, there has been a jump, but not to the extent of what two-wheelers and three-wheelers are doing it. In fact, we are lucky, we have our engineer Energizing India podcast, where we have an opportunity to speak to the leaders, the policy makers who are into this e-mobility field. And we can clearly see that all are trying to see that they push and unblock the growth that is in front of us today. Whether it can be financing, whether it needs a startup push-up. for their funding, which should be rocket fuel. I mean, the opportunities are huge today. We have to be nimble. I mean, you have to be on the toes. You can't be slow today. I mean, today, if you really look at it, you get up in the morning, today the technology is, today something else, tomorrow's technology will be something else. And it's really happening. It's really, really happening. And if you're not on your toes, if you're not adding the value to your products, you'll be out. If you really look at the opportunity, I'll tell you one thing. Today, if I want to buy an EV, or if I want to buy a car and anybody wants to buy a car, today at least the discussion is whether we should go for IC or electric vehicle. Believe me, today who's buying IC car, next car, his will be an EV. That's an opportunity today in India. Thanks.
Thank you. So invest in R&D. There's huge opportunity. Today's car purchasers would be, if you're buying a car today, if it's an ICE vehicle, it's probably going to be a lost ICE purchase. Thank you for your input, sir. Abhishek, I'll come to you next. Mr. Bhambani mentioned opportunity in the Indian market. As per your experience, what do you see investors more attracted towards in the Indian EV space? And how do you compare that over the past 5 years? How has the investor sentiment for the Indian EV market changed?
Thanks, Komal. So when I joined Invest India almost 5 years back, our conversations with investors used to revolve around if they should invest in India or how the EV ecosystem is going to unfold. The last 2 years have been monumental in the sense our conversations with investors are mostly around expansion plans, plant inaugurations. In fact, we've been seeing a lot of growth on 3 fronts. One is obviously the OEM, the second bit is auto electronics, and the third part is the battery supply chain. There are already 3 OEMs which are in the public domain. There's Tesla, there is VinFast, there's Foxconn, and an EV policy is also in the works to have these OEMs set up manufacturing plants in the country. In the last decade, what has also happened is the auto electronics which go in any vehicle, they have gone up from almost 10% to 40 to 45%. And we are seeing Japanese and Korean companies who are looking for joint venture partners in India to manufacture these electronics in the country. And there are conversations happening in the advanced stages with a lot of OEMs. And lastly, since battery cell happens to be one of the major components of any electric vehicle, we are also seeing a massive interest from the supply chain companies. To give you an example, separator forms 10 to 12% value add of any electric vehicle. And 90% of these separators are controlled by one American company. While their separators are being tested by the likes of Ola Excite, there are also conversations happening at the highest level in the government to bring this company to India and offer them whatever incentives are needed so that we can have the entire supply chain within the country.
So electronics is the word, the crucial word here. Can you hear me? Great. So Joseph, building on what Abhishek said, what in your opinion, firstly, are Abhishek's opinion as a public policy consultant, is his experience in line with what you would say investors are correctly pointing at? And do you think, is there any particular sub-segment within the EV space that they might be undervaluing, overseeing, that you think needs much more attention?
Yeah, thank you, Komal. Couple of things I'll point out before there are 2 things actually that have been undervalued in the entire EV supply chain. And at Niti Aayog, we have studied the deep analysis of the EV and battery storage supply chains. And we have seen the subcomponents of battery, which is the anode, cathode, foil, separator, and the electrolytes. So this is where the biggest opportunity exists, because today we are incentivizing the incentives on product base, the end product. So to bring the economies of scale, to bring the capture the not just the domestic market but the entire globe. Uh, your your Bloomberg outlook, it puts $10 trillion market by 2030, the battery storage, EV and battery market. I think this is an opportunity where India needs to aggressively invest in the sub-components chain. That's one part. And another part, that the missing piece in the puzzle is, it's the circular economy. So where the investments needs to go in. I'll tell you one statistics that today we have almost 35 million vehicles which are like reached the end of life vehicles. And we have here who is an eminent expert, Mr. Vijayji from Niti Aayog. We put together a committee on circular economy, and we have drafted a strategy to unlock this market. I think with the vehicle scrapping policy that came in April, now the missing piece is creating large-scale bankable projects in the circular economy. To give you an example, Renault has made a $300 million investments in Europe to create an entire end-to-end, of their value chain of the vehicles that are on the road. I think these are the two pieces that the opportunities that Indian investors needs to look at. And just give you some more statistics that, as Shantanu pointed. So the market, the battery storage market is like by 2030 is almost like a 100 gigawatt hour that we are looking at. 42 gigawatt hour coming from stationary and 43 coming from EVs. And as in an accelerated scenario, that's a base case. That's a base case scenario, as a business as usual scenario. If you put together in an accelerated scenario with a macroeconomic policy, which is what we are, stable policy which we are looking at, this is going to be like double or triple. So we are looking at almost like a $14 billion per annum kind of an investment opportunity.
Interesting. I would like to switch gears here a little bit. We heard from our esteemed panelists the experiences, identifying the opportunities and challenges. I'd like all of us to now focus on the future, shift gears a bit, and see how these opportunities that we've been speaking of, how can we utilize them best to our capabilities. I first want to focus on charging. So for four-wheelers, well, right now the EV penetration rate is less than 4% in India, but that is going to increase as we go forward with the falling battery prices. If from a charging point of view, how do you think for an average car owner, how will their behavior towards charging change? Right now we have access to plenty of private parking spaces or even shared parking spaces in multi-storied buildings. But once we reach mass market EV adoption, how do you see the dynamics between home versus commercial versus public changing? And do you think battery swapping might have a role to play here?
I'll restrict my response to the four-wheeler side. See, in the four-wheeler, as per the government data, in the urban cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru, Hyderabad, if you see, and 60 to 70% cars are parked on the road, which is unauthorized, right? Because you don't have access to the reserved parking. Because when we discuss, normally we see the multi-story apartments, and we believe that everybody has a parking. But we forget that everybody has 3 cars. 1 car is parked in the parking and 2 cars are parked on the road. So when you talk of the ultimate scenario, when the EV gets price parity, which we believe, as Mr. Nitin also said, that once you have economies of scale, the sale price would go down, the vehicle will attain the price parity. And I'm a strongly believer that by 2026, when the PLI scheme would get materialized, we would have the price parity in India as well. So once the vehicle becomes at par, then there is no looking back, the people will be driving ICE if there are availability of the models, availability of those vehicles there. So if you talk from that point of view, then 60 to 70% cars are still require charging. So for charging, normally you will have three places. One is the home, one is the work or business places, and third is your wherever you are going. It's the malls, hotels, dhabas, restaurants, cinema halls, exhibitions. These are the natural places where you'll go and you'll charge your vehicles. But considering all these factors, we assume, and that's with the great convictions, that 60 to 70% charging will happen at public places. Even at home, the charging will happen at the DC rate, not on the AC. AC will be very small segment in the long term. I'm not talking of the initial days because every car manufacturer is giving the AC along with the car. This is not globally done. This is done in India where, car OEMs want to sell the car and they give you 3.3 kilowatt or 7 kilowatt or 11 kilowatt AC installed at your home. But if you see from the electricity regulations point of view, our grid, I'll give you just one statistics. Let's say you take 200 inmates apartments. Ideally, they would have a 2 megawatt of sanction load because every house will have 8 to 10 kilowatt of the sanction load. Now, 2 megawatt load is already there, right? Now, if you want another 7 kilowatt, 11 kilowatt charger, you would be required to have a separate connections. And the vehicles which you are now coming with a 7 kilowatt, 11 kilowatt onboard charger, which require AC charging of 7 kilowatt or 11 kilowatt, if you theoretically add this 200 house, another chargers of 11 kilowatt or 7 kilowatt, you are asking another 1.5 megawatt transformer to be added. Now what will happen? This 1.5 megawatt transformer will be getting loaded only during the night, and during the daytime when these vehicles will be off from the house, will be completely unutilized. Now that's a sheer wastage of the resources on systems where you are lacking the availability of the electricity. So the better way would be that you go for a community charging within society, you add 3-4 DC fast charger of 50 kilowatt and add few AC chargers. And this will take care of the entire 200 vehicles, because one vehicles will, once charged, they will be going for 400 kilometer or 500 kilometer. That will give them 6 days running. So every day you don't require charging as well. So that is the way forward I think India as a country should adopt. As a consumer, I would always prefer fast charging. Reason being because time is a premium for me. Whenever I go, I don't want to spend 4 hours or 5 hours on the AC charging, unless I am required to spend there. So we believe that it will be DC fast chargers will be 70% market shares. 30% will be the home charging plus the slow charging wherever you go. And even if it is backed up by the statistics, not that only we are saying, even if you see the International Energy Agency's Outlook, EV Outlook report of 2022, they have also said that in India, ultimately 55% will happen on the public charging. But we have a different view. We say that 70% will happen on the public charging, and that too on the DC side primarily.
Thank you, sir. It's very interesting you suggested community charging, essentially working as mini fueling stations within a particular community. You spend 15 minutes, charge it, and you're on your way. I want to move a little bit away from private ownership. I also want to touch upon electric buses. Now, currently, most of the electric buses in the market are deployed by the government, who have the availability of big depots where they can spend the vehicles can be charged overnight. But increasingly, we're also seeing, and there will be a time when private uptake will also go up. But the issue there is then not an availability of a readily available space, accommodating these big vehicles with high power chargers, and the subsequently higher investments are required. How do you approach this conundrum for private electric buses? Do you think there might be a potential of a public-private partnership kind of a business model, or would the private sector innovate differently?
In the bus segment, clearly there is a urgent need of the PPP model. But what we believe that in the cities, it will still be depot-based charging, even if it is a privately owned, because in cities, finding the large space is very difficult, where you can have 10 vehicles, 10 buses parked. You have to have a depot. But along the when you talk of the intercities, along the highways, you'll find large parcels of land where the vehicles in any case have stopped, because even if you go from Delhi to Chandigarh, you stop in between either Karnal or Murthal or Ambala, and that's the place where the charging infrastructure has to be developed for the buses as well. So I think that is something which will evolve over a period of time. Already people have started working on that one, like we are setting up a hub of charging infrastructure in the Karnal, where 40 charging points will be coming up, and where a charging infrastructure will have a capacity of 200 kilowatt. So the buses can be charged, and these 200 kilowatt chargers has a capacity to dispense as low as 25, as high as 200. So even the Tata Nexon can be charged, BMW can be charged, and the buses can also be charged. And you require a larger space, so we have acquired a space where we'll be setting up this infrastructure. So this kind of a model has to develop along the highways for the buses, and within the cities you have to rely on the depot, and that's where the government's role comes into picture.
Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned intercity availability of infrastructure. Mr. Bambani, my next question would be to you, moving beyond intracity and intercity transport, as we see more and more people using their electric vehicles to cross state borders, city borders. How has the development of highway charging infrastructure, according to you, what more is needed? Of course, the government has, various state governments as well as the federal government, they've launched tenders to set up these chargers. But do you think that's sufficient? How can we cater to this intercity transport electric vehicle fleet going forward?
I think it's not only sufficient that government floats the tenders and you will have all the chargers in place, but I think everybody, even the private people have to come together and set up these charging stations. Now, when we talk about, what I can see is with the demand growing and all, the chargers not only on the highways, it will be available everywhere. Like for example, you have shopping malls, at your parking lots, wherever. I mean, it will be like, say for example, today you want to charge a mobile. Where you want to charge a mobile? Anywhere, right? At home, at hotel, on the highways. That's coming up. But what I can see is today you see the petrol pumps. Yeah, you have diesel, V-power diesel, V-power petrol, normal petrol, right? CNG. Finally, it will be this place. I do not know what those places will be called, but it will have all in one place. For the IC, you will have battery swapping, you will have fast chargers, you will have cafeterias. That's the one. That's what I can see. But alone, government, I do not think so. It will be enough. Even the private CPOs, OEMs, everybody will have to come together and set up these charging stations, but competitive charging stations. I mean, you go to some state, you'll have something different rates. You go to this state, you will have a different rates. Competitive pricing with better features and the faster features. That's what consumer demands today. But definitely not only the tenders will not work, because tenders today, I'm sorry, works on L1. And once you have an L1, then there are compromising in the quality. See, what happens is when you are in the L1, today you won't come to know. But when the load, when the utilization of chargers increases, that is the real test. It will come. It's not the number of chargers, how many chargers, how many. You read in the papers, you read in every social media that we have 2,000 points installed, we have 10,000 points installed. Are those working? I mean, today you don't come to know. In tendering, installing chargers, hundreds in numbers, but you need to see that the reliability comes first. Resilience, product should be resilient. And the actual test will really come once the population increases and your chargers are not underutilized and they are fully loaded 24/7. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So the prevalence of the L1 awarding in the bidding system must be faded out, and a possibility of a future where we have electric vehicle charging points along with your traditional non-fossil fossil fuels being catered to at one place. Mr. Seth, to this point, how do you see EV adoption impacting fuel retailers, given that fuel supply is their core business, which EVs are eating into? And do you think EV charging can defend an oil retailer's business? And this is not a question just to Reliance, but to the industry at large.
I think first let me give you a contrary view to what was just being discussed. Maybe I was keeping quiet about it. Long distance travel, I'm talking about trucks and buses, I'm not talking about cars. Long distance travel with an EV vehicle for trucks and buses is not a viable solution, contrary to what was being just said very clearly. It was being discussed, fast charging deteriorates the life of the battery to a great extent. If 40 to 50% of the price of the vehicle is battery, and if it deteriorates because you want to do fast charging, is actually going to be not viable for the operator who is going to do fast charging multiple times, because he wants to spend 1 hour, 2 hours to do that. So to me, I have a very straight contrarian view. Long distance buses and truck, hydrogen is a much better option than EV. It takes only 10 minutes to fill a truck or a bus on hydrogen, rather than taking even for fast charging 2 hours, 3 hours to charge a truck or a bus. We have studied the transportation business which government is issuing for the various buses for the city routes also. To me, it is, while you are giving 40% subsidy from the government for these buses, actually nobody is making money in this process. While you're doing EV, it's not actually making money. Contrary to say what Reliance has done is to develop hydrogen ICE direct combustion engine trucks and buses, which commercialized 2 years from now will be a much more and a very cheaper viable option to EV buses and trucks for city as well as intercity operations. So first of all, I'm not in the favor of what was being done. Yes, short distance travel for two-wheeler, three-wheeler is a different game, and a car is a different game. I'm not discussing cars. Trucks, buses for no way. Second thing, coming to the discussion which was just said, swapping is a much better solution for two-wheeler and three-wheeler than fixed charging post-subsidy era. Customer who is driving 20 kilometers is paying the same amount of money the customer is driving 80 kilometers. To me, if one way to make it viable is to give 20 kilometers on pay-per-use basis rather than paying for 80 kilometers, which anyway I'm not going to drive. So these are two contrarian views to what was being just discussed. Coming to the future, long distance travel, it may be divided between petrol, diesel, ethanol, methanol, maybe hydrogen, maybe multiple issues. Yeah, today you are 100% diesel and petrol. Tomorrow it may get split into hydrogen, ethanol, methanol, maybe petrol, diesel in some way. So it will get split. Maybe part of it will be EV also, no doubt about it. All, let me say, oil companies may have to do is to create an option for multiple fuel dispensing, maybe CNG, maybe ethanol, methanol, maybe hydrogen, and then it will not go away. Real estate is not going to go away. In the same pump, you may have 2, 3 dispensing, 4, 5 dispensing coming up. Don't think this business is going away. The business might get split into multi-fuel or multi-technology solutions. The business, each company has to reinvent itself to the changing dynamics of the auto industry. But it is not that the petrol station have to shut down, nothing will happen on that. It will just, the ratios may split between. And therefore, I'm not talking particular Reliance, I think everybody is cognizant that from now till 2030, the petrol, diesel as an economy may be multi-fuel, multi-technology in the next 10 years. And I'm sure many companies are fully aware of it and they will actually do those changes. One thing please understand, real estate is going to be the key for any of the things we have just spoken about. Power connection, fuel connections is not going to come tomorrow morning. Everybody is saying, and second thing which I think people are not realizing, today you have 4-5% of the industry on EV. Imagine you are 40% of industry on EV. I don't think grid has so much of electricity available to charge 40% of the industry. It will keep collapsing. It will keep collapsing. You just can't have power for 40%. Imagine in the night, most of the people will do it in the night. They will start charging. I can tell you the grid will collapse. It's not going to be for somebody to just say unlimited power available in the night. It's not the case. Second thing which was just said, but not fully understood. When you are in a multi-story apartment, you can install chargers only at certain selected points in a multi-story. If there are 400 cars in the basement, I think the walls along which maybe 20 cars can do it. What happened to the balance 280 cars standing in the main in subway? They are not going to get connections in. And there will be fight in the evening who will charge next to the wall. First come first. And if you don't have a charge in the night, how will you go to office tomorrow morning? So easier said than done to say we are visualizing because you're 2%, 3% of the market today. The moment you have 30, 40%, hell will break loose in the evening at every apartment itself. In the evening, like in Delhi, many places, you have a parking fight on the road. Whoever comes first can park and go. Balance can keep fighting after the day. I think it is not something which can be solved so easily. Therefore, there will be multi-solutions. There will be a swapping game. There will be a fixed game. There will be a hydrogen game. And then there may be a solar feeding into the grid. Then you may have some power available by solar coming into rather than generating. That is my view, and that is the way I think it will move. There is no solution for anything straight away.
Regarding the availability of the electricity energy, that even 30%, 40% moves to this one. So as per the various reports of the supported by the government or by the distribution companies, if entire fleet of the car and the two-wheelers which is available in India as of now, as far as car is concerned, I'm talking of the petrol cars and diesel cars, currently it is 40 million population, gross stock of the car on the road in India is 40 million. If the entire car gets converted to the electric, the total requirement of energy is 5 to 7%. 5 to 7%. It's simple. You can do the arithmetics that if you have a 40 million cars, and on an average, if you have a 40 kilowatt hour of battery, because the majority of the battery is around 40 kilowatt, then you are talking about 1600 gigawatt hour of the electricity, right? Now, whereas your grid is dispensing around 1213 billion units of electricity. So it's a 5% to 7% as far as energy is concerned. Where it could be problem, which probably Mr. Seth is referring to, will be on the capacity side. On the local distribution, because local distribution at the 11 kV transformer, you have 200 kilowatt transformer or 400 kilowatt transformer. And if 10 vehicles of a 50 kilowatt comes together, at that point of time, that transformer would have a problem. And that might trigger, the problem in the grid. So not the energy per se, but it's the local distribution which could be a bottleneck. And that's where manufacturers like which Mr. Sunil is representing, and we as a charge point operator, we are recommending that you should go for a load balancing enabled charger, which can cater to, because your peak would be required for only 1 hour or 1.5 hours when all the vehicles will get connected together. So at that point of time, you can downrate the charging speed through the system itself. So there are ways by which this can be solved, because we are slightly late in adopting the charging infrastructure, whereas the other countries in the world like the California and the Norway, they have already done. They have demonstrated this is the bottleneck which you need to address beforehand. So energy, no problem in availability. Capacity at the local level, yes, this could be a bottleneck. We need to address it.
I think the point I was trying to make is not all cities, all colonies, not everything is balanced in a way that it can adopt. When you are selling vehicles, you are not saying whether your society has a balancing or not. Customer doesn't understand this economics behind what government is trying to do. I'm coming from the city of Bangalore. I can tell you in many parts of the Bangalore, there are still 2-hour power cuts every day. it's a city of Bangalore. I'm not talking about rural market at all. So if a city of Bangalore, which is the IT hub, the most growing city, you have power cuts as we speak today, I'm not expecting that things will iron out the whole country for EV adoption 5 years down the line. There are going to be local issues. These are going to be detriment for a customer confidence. Detriment to customer confidence. At the end, still people park on roads, still there are issues. So my suggestion and point I was trying to make it is, this needs to build up for EV adoption to go forward. Infrastructure changes have to happen. Easier said than done to say, yeah, it can penetrate. It's a question of we have to do multi-pronged strategy to make EV popular. Includes charging, including cost of the battery, includes cost of ownership, including detaching battery from the vehicle itself, including multi-fuel to move towards net carbon zero, which is I think everybody is looking for. So it is to be a multi-prong infra, come sourcing, come localization, come all that strategy have to fall in place for this to become a dream into a reality.
Thank you. Interesting. So the choice of low emission fuel dependent on the vehicle segment, and then requirement of preparing your chargers towards possible grid balancing challenges in the future. I'd like to shift gears a little bit here, and Abhishek, I'd like you to come in. As somebody who's worked with investors for the last 5 years, do you think the current policy support, first of all, how has it been received? Is it sufficient? When would we need to phase it out? And do you think there are any policy gaps that would help, investors tap into the opportunities much sooner?
So in terms of the policy framework, obviously there are policies at the central and the state level. From a central point of view, the PLI for battery cells and auto, which was closed earlier last year, we had confirmed investments from various investors to the tune of $12 billion US. And then there are demands, incentives like the FAME, the new FAME is also being currently worked on. And then there are state incentives, which can be negotiated or customized basis the sector and the investment size. There are a lot of newer things which are being looked at, as Mr. Seth mentioned, battery swapping. We are working with a couple of battery swapping players who are telling us the kind of things they have done in other countries. So Gogoro is the world leader from a swapping point of view. And what they've done in Taiwan is that there is a swapping station every 500 meters. And we are trying to understand how we can replicate the same thing, maybe at a city level first, to understand what the challenges are, and then probably take it at a wider level. Also, from a policy gap point of view, what we're doing is we're doing something called as the Chintan Shivir. So out of the 35 sectors, we have identified 12 focus sectors. We had a pre-Chintan Shivir yesterday, where we invited key companies from an electric mobility point of view. The inputs were taken, and then now we're doing another closed roundtable session with the Honorable Commerce Minister on 12th of October. So a lot of these activities also help us understand where the gaps are, what's happening globally, and then work on, policies or industry consultations accordingly. Obviously, Niti Aayog happens to be the think tank. We work more from an industry consultation point of view with the Ministry of Heavy Industries, which also happens to be the nodal ministry for auto and electric vehicles.
Building on that, Joseph, I know you mentioned a requirement of development of battery supply chain moving beyond assembly, as well as, I believe, circular economy. Do you think, how would different stakeholders could approach this problem? So essentially, what are the pressing needs going forward? Urgent areas of action that the government requires, and what role could different stakeholders play in moving towards addressing these challenges?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question. So, couple of things. Uh, One is to create a bankable projects. We hear, we hear the charter everywhere the same. You go to numerous conferences, you'll hear the same charter. But what we need, all the stakeholders, we need to do is to come together, put our heads to create a bankable projects, large scale bankable projects, and we need to look at the promised land is not 100 billion, 200 billion. It's a $1 trillion market. We need to unlock that, and we need to unlock uh, the bankable projects cannot be happen in a moment. We need to create confidence in the industry to, to, to accelerate their investments, to see the opportunity. I think that's the major intervention. So on the upstream side, the macroeconomic stable policy, which is we are seeing. On the midstream side, what we need to look at is creating these bankable projects. On the downstream side, so there's a multiple channels which are trying to unlock climate finance into the industry. I think that's cumulatively together, these interventions will solve the piece of the puzzle. That's what I look at it. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much for your inputs. I'd like, in one sentence or less to all of you, I'd like to throw a question. From today, over the next 5-7 years, India has 2030 ambition for EV adoption. What do you think is that one challenge that needs the most focus on, in a sentence or less? Mr. State, we'll start with you. One pertinent challenge or an opportunity.
Okay.
That
We have to provide customer a solution, not a transaction. Let me expand in that one way. Customer today buying automobiles today in a transaction mode. That means service solution is what he's looking for, which can be battery as a service, it can be mobility as a service, it can be charging as a service. It will not be an asset that he would like to own. He would like to have a solution, and solution will pressurize the companies to provide him infrastructure because he is going to be on pay-per-use basis.
Joseph.
Yeah, I think one is the giving an infrastructure status to the EV infrastructure, because the kind of outlook that's going to be is the longer contracts. It's an economic opportunity. So it's not just an industry that is just rising up. It's not it's an economic opportunity. And the second thing that I quickly I can think of is the unlocking the skilled people in the sector. These are the two things that I can think.
I think the two biggest things which are going to be a challenge in the next decade, the first one being the battery supply chain, and the second one is going to be the refining capabilities, because more than 90% refining currently happens in China. And unless we have the raw materials and the refining capabilities, we'll always be dependent on somebody else and won't have economies of scale from an EV point of view.
So clearly, we see that the public charging has to expand, and to expand it, the entire electric mobility has to give an infrastructure status, because that will enable it to access the long-term funds, long-term capitals and other things. So that will enable the infrastructure expansion.
I think I'll say one word, which is localization. Localizations at all the levels, whether you're talking about the chargers, whether you're talking about the battery cells, battery packs. I mean, it has to be localization, because you will have to be competitive and the demands will go on increasing. I mean, it's not, I'm talking about the demands in terms of the volume, in terms of the features. For example, we were just discussing in the apartments, how do we take care of these loads? There are methods. So localization, and as I mentioned earlier in my first, your investment in technology and R&D will play a major, major role. Thank you.
Thank you. So lots of suggestions across the supply chain, charging, offering services to the vehicle owners, and then localization. I'll take the next 5 minutes for the audience questions. If you have any questions for the panelists, please, I encourage you to ask them now.
Hello. Sorry. One thing I didn't see anyone discussing is the price parity of electricity versus fossil fuels. So we know the current price, but what is the forecast in future? Because tomorrow if the price parity changes and then the whole business equation will go and the viability will go. What is the long-term price parity of fossil fuels versus electricity pricing?
I see as an EV user, once my upfront cost of the owning the vehicle, be it petrol and the electric, is same, then I am neutral whether my electricity price per kilometer is as same as the per kilometer of the petrol price.
I think the price parity will come if you start giving a solution. Otherwise, you're dependent on subsidy for everything. Because today people are subsidizing, hence parity looks okay. Because battery is getting subsidized. Tomorrow you say, forget subsidy. Suppose subsidy goes away. In the current form, it will not sell. Why will I pay 40% extra? But because that is a transaction. You're paying upfront cost for a battery. But tomorrow if I convert that into pay per use, and I spread the assets over 7-8 year period rather than 3 year period, parity will come despite subsidy not being there. There will be localization which will reduce the price down. But even if there is a gap, customers will start buying the EV vehicle because he sees his OPEX will be much cheaper than his CAPEX. Today, everything in automobile industry is CAPEX based. Pay me upfront cost, 20% down payment, I will give you the vehicle, then you own your headache. Tomorrow you change to solution, customer will start owning the asset on pay per use, and therefore, despite gap being there, it is still viable. That will increase adoption of EV vehicles. You cannot expect government to subsidize forever. The subsidy will go away. Partly it will come down because of localization.
This is what will decide the long-term change from fossil fuels to renewables or
I'll just answer the long-term perspective. Excuse me. Yeah, can you hear me, sir? Yeah, so see, the global oil prices are never going to come down less than $100 per barrel. And we are looking at 1 liter of diesel, today the oil is sitting at, in any city, between 97, 90 plus to 100 rupees per liter. And the per unit electricity cost, it can vary between, let's say, on a very optimistically like 7 rupees per unit till 15 rupees per unit, or 20 rupees you make it. Still there is a large markup. And I think moving on, we will, the fluctuations in the macro fluctuations will not bring down the oil prices, while the electricity prices, as the globally the investments accelerate around the solar. We have seen in India itself, India is the face of the world in terms of solar, and how we brought 10 rupees, 15 rupees, 25 rupees per unit to 2 rupees per unit. So this is the dynamics which is going to work and put the entire electric vehicles and battery industry further ahead and competitive to the other industries.
No, I still have a contribution.
I have a point on that. See, any new technology, fracking came into the market, oil prices dropped. Any new technology on petroleum exploration could change the whole dynamics. We don't know.
No, the reverse will also happen. If everybody in the EV world starts adopting automobile company, where is the lithium and nickel going to come from? It's never ending mines, no? So unless the battery chemistry also changes towards something which is available, which many people in the globe are working toward. Sodium ion is one example. Sodium is much more available in the world than, let's say, lithium or nickel. So battery chemistry also has to change to be let me say, much more affordable. Otherwise, small mines, everybody going, those prices will go up because after some time the mines are limited. So it is a multiple issues. It is not one direction that it can work. So chemistry of the battery has to change because everybody will run after battery. mines are not available throughout the world, parallelly the other prices will go up. So there is going to be a dynamic equation as you go forward. Before EV becomes, it will become the main game, but it will not be an easy game unless not as what is today. There will be multiple changes as you go forward.
Hi, Kunal. I represent a company called Molson. We're a chemical company. My question is to Tejaji and Bansalji. Bansalji just touched a point that we need refining capacity in India. Next to you is Nitinji, who represents world's largest refiner without India having any oil. India can do the same for refining metals, especially lithium, but we still do not have a policy framework on it. Now, this is from a layman perspective. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of conversation with government. Can you throw some light? Can India expect refining capacities? Now, it's a very big question. Japan is going to come up with one. China has 95%. Can India see a refining capacity in next 3-5 years, at least an announcement? Because capacity activation will take another 3-4 years. So, just if you can throw some light.
It's a tough puzzle, Kunal. So, in terms of, India has joined recently, as you know, the Mineral Security Partnership along with the, US and other countries. So, I think, as I mentioned, it is an untapped opportunity where investments has to accelerate, and government is also closely watching. I'll give you an example. What is our learnings from the PLI schemes was. So the central government is giving a certain amount of subsidy on the product that is going to come out, and overlapping activity was state is also giving the same, their subsidies for the product that is coming out. So everybody is giving to the end product. So there is a overlapping of activities. This is what we are trying to see and declutter. Okay, somebody needs to invest in the value chain. The value chain, we need to capture it. There is a close observations, close watch is happening. That's where I can keep it. I cannot go ahead and share so many details. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, audience. Thank you so much, our esteemed speakers and our kind moderator, for taking us through this insightful journey. May I kindly request Ms. Komal Kareer to kindly hand over a token of appreciation and love to our respected speakers for the session. I request Ms. Kareer to share the token of love with Mr. Nitin Seth, CEO, New Mobility Reliance, and may I have a photo opportunity for the same? Mr. Joseph Teja, Consultant, Senior Specialist, Electric Mobility Call Start. Mr. Abhishek Bansal, Lead Capital Goods and Investment Specialist, Automotive EVs, Invest India, Ministry of Commerce. Mr. Avdesh Jha, Executive Director, GLIDA. Mr. Sunil Bhambani, Managing Director, Edor Digetron Private Limited. And I would take my privilege to share a token of love with Ms. Kareer. Now, can we please have a photo opportunity for the entire panel for one go?